Welcome to Crossing Faiths. I'm GT Pinna, and today we're going to be talking about Afghanistan. And we have Mr. Naweed Kawusi, who's a former colonel in the ANA, founder of the Kabul Institute, and author of The Bleeding Nation: Superpowers, Ethnic Politics, and Afghanistan's Collapse. He also teaches at São Paulo University. Welcome.
Thank you, JT. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure, and anything we could. The problem is we talked for an hour right before we recorded about all kinds of stories about Afghanistan and what we've been doing, and all kinds of other stuff. And then you're in Brazil, so we were just discussing, cannibals in the Amazon and the jungles. So I appreciate you taking the time to record when we're not storytelling, I guess, so much.
I think, given our history, you and I have a lot to talk about. It's just not enough time to go over everything.
Yeah, when I got
There's
to
a
that,
lot
it's
of,
like one of those
yeah,
things where I get so excited, to have some of my countrymen on in recording. So, but I appreciate you taking the time.
of course. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about what's, first of all, a little bit about who you are and what you're about. I mentioned that you're a colonel. You left in it was it in August of in the draw with the drawdown. Maybe we talk a little bit about who you are in Afghanistan the last 20 years, and then you're leaving with the drawdown, and then the impetus of the book.
Of course. I left in October of
Oh, October.
2021,
Okay.
not in August, because what happened, I'll start there and then we can talk a bit about more about the before and after of it. On August 13, I was in Elmond. We were doing an audit of the expenses that were paid to the families of the National Police. That was also the same day that Elmond fell. I was on one of the two last flights that got out of Elmond. As soon as our plane took off, the Talibs, they got to the airport. They fired a couple of rounds at our plane, but it was one of those little smaller planes that takes like 10 people.
Right.
We took off. Nobody was hurt. We arrived in Kabul, and even then, even on that day, it wasn't really confirmed that it was all done. I went home. I got some rest. The next day, I put on my suit. I go into the Ministry of Interior looking for the minister. So I'm walking around trying to find this guy to get him to sign some documents for me, and he's nowhere to be found. Then I start getting these conflicting reports about his whereabouts. One person says he's at the presidential palace. The other one says he's at the Ministry of Defense. The other one says something else. One person, whom I shall not name, but was a deputy minister at the time, told me that the Minister of Interior took off last night. That's when I start to realize that, okay, something's happening here that we're not being kept in the loop about. So I asked my guys to radio the office where I was stationed. So Ministry of Interior was on the airport road, but I was on this other place at the Demazeng Square. So my directorate, as well as the General Recruitment Command for the National Police, we were on the same sort of base. I We asked them what's going on. They're like, the Talibs are at the gate. I'm like, they're not the Talibs. They're somebody else. But like, they're armed, they're violent, and their situation is it's getting out of hand. The General Recruitment Command already evacuated. They're all gone. What are your orders? So I think back that my unit was the police support unit, which is the equivalent of Veterans Affairs in the US. It's a bunch of civilians or a bunch of police officers who've never seen combat and they've always been behind a desk. That was not a sort of a risk you could take with their lives, with their level of experience and readiness. So I'm like, secure your files, secure your information and your assets or whatever you can, and get out. At that point, going back was not really an option. So I went home. I changed, took my uniform off, I put it somewhere safe. I changed into the Perantamban as I would. And then I destroyed my SIM card. I went out. I wanted to know what was happening. I went to the base. And by the time I got there in a taxi in a Toyota Corolla, the infamous Corollas, the base had already been overtaken. But this time it was the Taliban. They had arrived. They had taken the base and they were interrogating the boys at the gate about where's the money, where are the guns. They were like, "This is not that kind of a place. This
Right.
is more about taking care of the police families, about young people coming to be recruited." But they didn't go for it. So I saw that, and given my history, I when I started off, I was in the army, and the way we started and the missions and operations that I've been on, it doesn't make the Taliban like me very much.
Right.
So like, okay, time to move. So for the next few weeks until October 2nd, I kept moving around. I was off grid, never online, never used my phones, kept changing SIM cards, and I kept moving around, going to sleep at one friend's place and then the next night the next place. And then funny thing was that my aide de camp, the guy that was with me basically everywhere for the past 2 years, he gave my address to the Talibs, to the Badri units. Now, nobody at the ministry knew my address because when I did my registration and they did my documents, I gave them a wrong address. I come from Afghanistan. Trusting the system is never one of our strongest, suits. But they showed up at my house. They started unloading a couple of magazines on the windows and doors, and I lived in Sharakoria, which is an apartment sort of complex. There is no protection or anything. My wife and kids were at home. They were really scared. They had never, been in that situation before. At that point, I decided that, given how everything is going, maybe this is not the best time to stay put.
Right.
Yeah, my dad used to say that, when you become a father, when you become a parent, you become a coward. That is when that sentence made sense to me. That it's not just about me. If it was just me, you die once.
Right.
You've been there before. You've been very close to it. But when you have your kids and your family and your wife, you're responsible. So I got out, and out of I went to Pakistan, stayed there for a few days. Pure luck, I ended up. I was supposed to actually be on those flights that they were taking to Albania and all these places,
Yeah.
but for some reason, those flights didn't feel right. Um, I ended up in Brazil out of nowhere, and the first 2 years here, I started an NGO, a Brazilian NGO, where we brought in large numbers of former ANDSF, judges, lawyers, activists, journalists, about over 1,000 people actually. And then what had happened to Kabul and to Afghanistan and everything around it, and all of that, it was slowly weighing down on me. My productivity was getting bad, and I had buried it all this time. I'm like, "Well, you know what? You can stay where you are. I got stuff to do." It started showing and rearing its ugly head. So I took some time off. I went away, and that's when I started writing. So the book that you mentioned is not actually technically my first book, even. It is the first one that is going to be published, but it's not the first one written. Um, that's when I started writing, and writing to me acted as a therapy, as it helped me regain back what I had been working towards. And the adage comes to mind that you can take an Afghan out of Afghanistan, but you cannot take Afghanistan out of that Afghan. It came
Wonderful.
back, and I realized that, um, yeah,
That
it's
whole one drop of blood. If you have a little bit, one drop of Afghan blood, you still have it. That was a very
it's still
comforting,
in you.
knowing how distant I was from the family and everything else. It's just to have that someone say that was really amazing at one point.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. It's always gonna go with you, and that country is like a magnet. It keeps pulling you back,
Well,
regardless of how far you go away.
yeah, I mean, I got challenged. We were at Nadrahan Hill the first time I'd been back to Afghanistan, and we're at Nadrahan Hill, and I don't, what Nadrahan Hill where that like the tomb is, and there's a guy with
Yeah.
a horse, and I was there with like Ibrahim and a couple of other guys, and they're like, "Well, you're Afghan, you could ride a horse," and I hadn't ridden a horse in 10 years, maybe 15 years, and so like, no, let's show us, and I was like, oh. you know,
It's like riding a bike.
so I get on the horse and I rear the horse up and we just start running right across Nottingham Hill. So we start running all the ladies with their the birds with their scarves are going, and I get to the end. I'm like, he's a horse, so I'm like, he's not going to jump off the. So I get to the end and I'm sitting there on the horse going like that because like I haven't ridden a horse, so that I'm like I gotta go turn around, I gotta come back. So I bring the horse around and we come all the way back, in a gallop, and I hold the horse back, reins back, one leg over the saddle because it's those old cavalry saddles, those army cavalry saddles.
Hmm.
And then stick around, and right away I put my hands on my sides because I was shaking because I hadn't ridden the horse in such a long time. But you got it's like you're like don't fall off, don't do this, hope it stops, but you pull on the reins,
Right.
hope he doesn't fall down. And you're at a point in your life where you're like you're in your 40s, you're not too that was too old but too young, and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna break something. But after that, everybody's like, he's definitely Afghan, and which was that was my street
You
cred.
rode the horse.
Yeah,
You rode the horse. It's
yeah,
done.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
was
Uh,
that's that's the Bukashi here that I was there that day in the Panjshir Valley playing, so but that was years later. But, uh, but in any event, yeah,
um,
one drop
that
of
that
blood,
yeah.
that ghost of Afghanistan stays with you, because it is who you are and what you're about.
It does, and I really tried to move away. Like the pain of it was a bit much. I wanted to move away. I wanted to forget about it and go away and do something else. Completely be something else.
Yeah,
But didn't happen. 2 years off grid, and then I came back, and I'm like, you know what? No, I want to do something, and that's when I came in, and I started looking at what was happening, and I started realizing that Afghans are so divided on social media and in public forums, especially the diaspora.
yeah,
And these are the educated ones. These are the ones who went to the fancy universities, they had the fancy jobs, they got the big salaries, and how divided they were, and how, I mean, we both understand how traumatized Afghans are, generation after generation of war. And then this happened where they had all their hopes and everything tied to the house of cards, pardon the cliche, but that's what they had done it. And then they started looking at who to blame. The one thing that I think you and I can agree on about Afghans is that the first thing we do is we blame somebody else.
sure.
And it's like they were like, oh, the US did this to us, or the Europeans did this to us. I'm like, yes, but what did we do to ourselves? As soon as we see somebody who's not an Afghan, we automatically give them so much value, so much more than we should give to our own Afghan.
Yeah,
And that's been, I think it could be a staple of being a colonized mindset. It could be a staple of the trauma of war, of where you realize that generation after generation of your who you are, your community, your family is always reporting to some foreigner that's been in charge or who's paying the bills. And we've had that like for years.
yeah,
And all of that together, I was like, okay, what is the one thing that is tying these up together? Like, what is going on? Why can we not break the cycle? Like, if you look back into Afghanistan, every government that has come after, Zahir Shah, it's been supported, installed, and funded, and even managed, you could say, by some foreign government.
yeah,
Like even the 2002 Republic. Like me, I'm a big fan of the idea of Republic. But our Republic was, we have written books about it. We've talked about it, and we're going to talk about it more, you and I as well. But it had a lot that it left to be desired for.
yeah, yeah.
There was,
It's difficult when you're trying to be when it's things you're trying to be aspirational. You're trying to improve your life, but you're trying to improve the destiny of of a people, of a country. And for a foreign entity comes in that is down the road, you can lose yourself in getting close to that, and that which is what you're talking about. And there's also these other things, like your book goes into the history of Afghanistan, right? So here we are, and it's like there's this when this pivotal point of 1240, when the Mongols invaded, where you had Bactria, you had Bactra, the mother of all cities, the land of 1,000 cities. I'm big on that. You know what I mean? I'm big on that. And so and it all ceased to exist. It's nobody knows
Mm.
what Bactria is. Nobody knows what Bactria is. And I know I'm Indo-Greek, right? So I'm going to plug that a little bit, right? So, but my point is that no one really knows what that is. But if you go up to Mazar and you look at those walls that you can see from space, right? You can see the
Yeah.
circle from space. You're like, what happened here? And there's it's difficult because there's people will talk about more about the Great Game and how the Afghans beat those British armies, the three army groups, but they don't. There's the pivotal points in ancient history, the Silk Roads, and the building of these kingdoms and the existence of these kingdoms for culturally, ethnically, religiously, and the power they had economically aren't really part of the parlance of the conversation, and so you
No.
don't have that sense of pride that other cultures and communities have. So there's already that sort of that feeling that you have. I mean, would you agree? Was that part of the impetus of the conversation you were having yourself in the writing of this book?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. To me, what to be the one thing that sort of made me decide that this needs to be said, the one thing that sort of like popped into my face was before I wrote the first line of the book was that every major group, every major freedom group of freedom fighters, resistance, government, regime in Afghanistan, before they had a flag, they had a foreign benefactor.
Yeah,
That was the big problem every single time. And I keep listening to Afghans inside Afghanistan. They don't care about what ethnicity you're from. I lived in a place in Afghanistan where I had Hazaras on this side, Pashtuns in the middle, Panjshiris next to it, Tajiks, and then more Hazaras. And all of my time living in that house, not for a single time did I hear any of them going off against each other.
right.
They would argue about you put your snow on my, in my yard. You parked your car wrong.
Sure.
Can you give me some water? But it was never about your ethnicity or their ethnicity. And then I started digging a little deeper, and what I realized was that every time there's a foreign power, they back a specific group.
Yes.
Like started off with the when the Taliban came the first time, or even go back further when there was the Daud Khan coup d'état. Which specific group did the foreign power at the time, the Soviet Union, support? And then with the other group, the next one iteration of it, and then you have the Republic that comes in, and the before Republic, the U.S. forces come in and they support the Uzbeks and the Tajiks in the Northern Alliance. The pattern was so obvious that every time these ethnicities have been pitted against each other, the one thing that was common, the one common denominator, was revenge and grievances. So that cycle kept repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating. And it wasn't the people that was doing it, it was a very select group of people that was doing it. And the thing at the end of it that they would all say is, we beat these people. We beat the Brits, we beat the Soviets, we beat the Americans, the Europeans, we're the graveyard of empire. And they keep using that term
Sure.
as if this is some old wise saying from an old Afghanistan. It's really not. People have a goldfish memory. They forget that the first time, I think if my memory serves me right, the first time that term was coined and used was in 2001. It was the CIA station chief in Pakistan. Trying to remember his name. I think it was Milton or something. Milton Bearden.
Yeah.
Yeah, he coined it in an op-ed that he wrote for Foreign Affairs, arguing against the invasion of Afghanistan. And that term has been used by the Afghans to show themselves bigger than they are by saying, we're the graveyard of empires. We have buried empires here. Yeah, but we've also buried generation after generation of our own people as well as future.
Yeah.
is really not the biggest achievement out there. And what I realized was that we're following the same pattern of I'm going to beat you, I'm going to be in power for a few years until you find somebody else to, be your benefactor, then you beat me and I do it again. Recently, there was some former Republic officers who announced that they have made some headway into the fight against Taliban. They have been conducting targeted military attacks against them. I'm like, okay, change the labels. It's what the Taliban used to do during the Republic. They would target these military checkpoints, these police checkpoints, where you had to really lazy and hungry policemen who had not eaten for days, and they had like 30 bullets in a rusted magazine on a rusted old AKM. And you remove the labels, it's the same thing. Going back further, the blowing up of the electricity pylons. Here's a fun fact. The Talibs didn't start that. The Mujahideen did.
Yeah.
They set this whole thing in motion. So what the book is trying to put in front of our faces is that for decades, for centuries, we've been used by others to do their bidding and to stand against each other and to kill each other and destroy our country that we had. This is something that needs to stop. The cycle needs to break. And regardless of how much people care about Afghanistan and about Afghans, at the end of the day, it's only the Afghans who are going to save this country. They're the ones, yes, there are going to be grievances. Yes, there's going to be problems. Yes, there's going to be disagreements. There are going to be sandals thrown at each other.
Sure.
But if you want to move past the strategy of the past 25 years of quick wins, where you had 20, annual strategies to rebuild Afghanistan as a nation, you're going to need to move past quick wins. That's what the whole book argues. This is why this is happening. This is not a new phenomenon where you have ethnic rivalries being fostered, weaponized, and pushed. Iran does their own thing.
Right.
Pakistan does their own thing. China does the same thing. The US did the same thing. Europeans had their own little, even now today, Ahmad Massoud is giving press conferences and getting invited in Europe in one specific country. Can you guess what that country is?
What's that country?
France.
France. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go back in history, you see the ties of the French they've had with the Mujahideen and his father and everyone before him.
Right.
This pattern is right there. And what we have consistently failed to see is that our multi ethnic composition is not something that divides us. It's what makes us stronger, what makes us diverse as a people. And the people who are actually living every single day in Afghanistan, and they've gone through all of this, they really have no problems with each other.
Right.
They're okay. It's the political elite, it's the educated ones who always get into each other's face, and they create this environment where you realize that um um they're always at war, and that what it translates to is the way information is managed when it comes to the American audience. It's a very curated image of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Go ask any American, what do you know of Afghanistan? The women are imprisoned, the men are Taliban, everybody is against us, they hate us. That's mostly what you hear. And that is wrong, which is not the real story of what is happening in Afghanistan. And that's something that we need Afghans to take the lead and to talk about. Every panel you go to, you've got 5 foreigners and 1 Afghan sitting there talking about Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Great, but this is not the Afghan story.
Well, it's interesting. If my platform is LinkedIn, and there's a lot of commentary on there's some on human rights with you have a lot of Afghans talking about human rights
Mm-hmm.
and talking about women, and particularly a lot of the women, the female diaspora, and some of the human rights things. But a lot of the commentary on Afghanistan, there was just a report put out by 2 former national security people who are not Afghan but worked in the Trump administration, Trump 1.0, and they just put out a report, and everybody's praising the report. and I'm going, God, Afghan, there's no Afghan inputs here. There's a they fetishize these Americans going over there and coming back, and like they have some kind of inward knowledge. And I'm not going to say that they don't have. I'm not going to devalue their experience or their engagement and so forth. But there's a massive diaspora here now. There's a massive diaspora globally, and very educated, on point people who weren't part of the war profiteering combine. There are a bunch of them that were, and you know how I feel about
Hmm.
that. But and tapping into that is something that is still not realized. And I think that speaks to what you're saying. It's like, as I always say, I don't speak for the Afghan people. I know I've been there. I know I have that blood. I, I think that there's a lot of really intelligent, smart Afghan diaspora that are here that can actually help with the trajectory of the nation, as well as socializing with some of the more in-depth aspects, like your book.
Hmm.
You're closer in orbit than I will ever be, right? So and I've always served the Republic, the U.S. Republic, American Republic, even when I was there. But
Hmm.
the bleeding nation component of it, it starts with a history, right? An in-depth history. It
It
goes back,
does. It does. Yeah, and the thing is the prevailing narrative is that Afghans are tribal.
right,
The what ethnic divisions we have is something that has been passed on to us through generation after generation, which is completely wrong. It is not. Yes, we are tribal. Some of our tribes and ethnicities have a tribal system, but that tribal system has been so now the way it's been introduced is so corrupted that it's turned into something that it's not. Everything that happens within that system, there's a logic to it. There's a belief system in it where people actually do it, adhere to those systems and those codes for the betterment of their life.
right,
The ethnic division keeps being pushed on us. You will see, even today, you'll see Pakistan siding with specific groups and pushing the same narrative of the Khorasan thing now.
right,
I'm like, we don't even have a country right now. Our constitution is null and void. The country is taken hostage by a group which has zero internal legitimacy, and it's no different from every other regime that was before it, with the exception that they are far, they're completely okay with picking people off a street, making them disappear, and then throwing their bodies at their front gate a couple of weeks later. And there's no accountability. That's to me is the I think the if I'm being honest, the big vision for the book and the story that I wrote and what I want people to understand is that what happened demands an accountability. Starting with Afghans, the leaders that we chose, the leaders that were imposed on us, what is their role going forward? How do we hold people accountable for what happened to us as a people?
right.
Not just the ones that we don't like, not just somebody who is from your tribe and we don't like it, just that person. No, everybody. I have this. What I've noticed is um, my this statement. I think to me makes a lot of sense that my warlord is the good warlord.
Right.
Yours is the bad one.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. You have like
Eh,
Dostum, he's up there with the Uzbeks. You got Atanor, you got Hekmatyar, you got all these guys, and they're like the unmovables, and they're the last of a long tradition of like strongmen. I mean, Dostum had his own army. He's got his,
Exactly.
the Northern Alliance,
Like,
and
think about this. Dostum you brought up a good person. Dostum, what is his background? Who are the people that are supporting him? Based on what criteria? Ethnicity.
yeah, it's ethnicity.
That's the whole
the,
thing.
yeah, he's got the Uzbeks, and then you got, and so like you have, I always describe, and like I said, you can indict me on this. I always say it's kind of like it's like the United States before the Civil War. You have like these instead of states, right? You have these sort of regions, and they're
Hmm.
all controlled. Like I always people I just had this conversation maybe 2 weeks ago, and somebody said, "Well, what would work in Afghanistan?" I go, kind of like a loose federalist system. And I was like, you got these sort of like ethnic territories, and everybody's got like their own standing army, right? And it's like a militia, and some of them are
Yeah,
not small armies, right? So like Dostum, is probably the most equipped, right? And so you have that going on. I don't even know if is he still alive? Because he had cancer.
he is. He
Okay,
lives in Turkey, still
yeah,
alive, still giving statements.
right. And so I go, you have this sort of loose federalist system where the federal government would only provide like infrastructure, collective security, and if there's an invader, and then like some services, right, and institute
Hmm.
services, but the rest would be reside in these sort of ethnic territories where and maybe a uniform currency or whatever the federal government, but it would have to be like a loose confederation like America before the Civil War, and that loose federalist system would allow for states' rights, whatever's happening in those territories, ethnic territories, and then it would be enforced by the local authorities with some sort of uniformity. And I go, aside from that, I'm not sure that you could institute anything else. Is that a fair assessment? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. It's also, I mean, that's the thing. Like with the yes, and what I've noticed about these people is that the every leader that we've had, they have sort of depended on two things to strengthen their base. And at the end of the day, them working with the central government that was, either imposed or installed or whatever, has always been about self-interest. Them becoming ethnic leaders has been about self-interest. Them becoming even, religious leaders have has been about self-interest. Them shifting, uniforms and allegiances has been about, cementing their own power base.
right.
Those stuff we talked about. How many regime changes did this guy survive?
Quite a
How
few.
many times was he held accountable? He became a marshal at the end of it. He became a vice president at the end of it.
Yeah.
That is the absence of any accountability. And guess who allowed it to happen? Guess who proposed this to happen?
Yeah.
A lot of people today blame Ghani.
Yeah.
He is the reason the government fell and everything. But even to this day, I dislike him as a person. He is short tempered, he's got a hot fuse, and he loses his patience very quickly. Those are bad things in a leader, and especially in a president. But put one man in a cage with six lions. Who do you think is going to win? The government that was built was manned, empowered, and filled up in positions by people that came because they were either warlords,
Strong.
they
Yeah.
were commanders, they had the people that if you didn't listen to them, they would take over a province.
Right.
And most of them had their own relationships built in over the years and years of jihad, where one side was being, supported, financially funded by a foreign government against the other foreign government, used as a cannon fodder, chess pieces,
Right.
and they had the potential to destroy the government from within at any given day, even if they didn't like the appointment of someone. And the international coalition that was in place, they really didn't care who was in power as long as they were controllable,
Yeah.
as long as they were someone who pushed the agendas of the said nation. Now, here's my thing. You probably will hear a lot of Afghans complain that they feel betrayed,
Yeah.
which I do not agree with this sentiment. Betrayed by who? For what? A foreign country came to your country for their own geopolitical agendas and goals. Would you not do the same thing if you were in their place? Would you not do the same thing? Have you not done the same thing when it comes to Iran and Pakistan when you have had the chance? Like Amrullah Saleh, the former Rahmatullah Nabil, our former heads of NDS. These guys, they had a lot of ops going, across the border.
Yeah.
These ops were not really the nice ops. They were probably put a lot of people in jail or in courts and everything. But that's what they do. That's the whole way it is done. To me, being betrayed does not work because, we betrayed our own country when we chose to fill up our pockets, when we chose to vote for a someone who was corrupt, when we chose to stay silent when a warlord, a former Mujahideen commander, did whatever they wanted. They took houses in, you know, Marshal Fahim, for example. The other Marshal, this dude owned half of Karte Parwan.
Yeah,
You had the peoples of Mohape and Khalili like own literally Karte Se, Karte Sahi, Karte Cha.
yeah,
You had the Pashtun Mujahideen warlords. What was this guy's name? The one who was, I forget his name. But he was a parliament member who lived near Utkel.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, he had the whole land and everything, and people were paying money for protection and everything. So to me, when people come and say that, these people were victims, these people were this, I'm like, no. Every ethnicity in Afghanistan paid the price. Every ethnicity had a warlord who looked like the national hero, but was a murderer and a killer and did a lot of things that destroyed my country. And the worst thing, the victims were the people,
Yeah.
the actual people who didn't really belong to any of these things.
Yeah, I think the challenge is just like, the people don't realize that America runs, we run our ops, and the challenge is the gravy train always ends. And then when the gravy train ends, that seems as a betrayal. I think you and I talked before we were recording or chatting back and forth. I was talking about the conversation with Jake Sullivan where I was like, for $600 million, Afghanistan touches all of our enemies. Why would we give that up? Like it serves the republic really well. Um,
Yeah.
but the challenge is that there's always a turn. There's always something that can happen where we pull it, and that the drawdown and that pulling of out of Afghanistan really, I think that shock because there was a sense of normalcy to the foreign aid. The everything was functioning. Uh, and what I mean by that is like the systems that were in place had maturized into a sort of a technocratic sort of bureaucracy that existed, and everybody was relying on that staying in place. And I think it's fair would be fair for Afghans to be upset with that disappearing, but but
Hmm.
but it doesn't absolve from the idea. I mean, there were billboard signs in the center of Kabul circle with Dostum on his tank giving money to somebody. Those were there.
Yep.
I remember those,
Yep.
and I was like, I remember chatting about it because I was never able to meet Dostum or never able to interact with them. Although it was one of those things where it was like a little bit of a fetish. I was like, can we meet him? And so and I was like, let's go. Although his sons were floating around and we were talking, and the Intercon Hotel, that was like I would go there for all the time with my cousins and hang out and we'd eat, and it was just, I think it was the 80th anniversary of Indonesian independence. Is that the oldest embassy that's there? I think it's Indonesia. It was like the 80th anniversary of their independence, and they
Mm.
invited me to the party, and we went there, and it was me and my number one. And I go and I would go to every table and I'd salam chitarastin and we chat and everything
No. Of
else,
course. Gotta
and
socialize.
yeah, socialize. And there was one table there, and I go and I sit and I salam chitarastin, and my number one goes, you can't be there, and I go, why? He goes, those are all the jihadis. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you don't understand. Like, this is that guy. This is so and so. This is so and so. I was like, in Kabul? And he's like, yeah. And I go, I was like, I don't know if you. I go, when would I ever be able to do this? And so I went and I, sat down and chatted with everybody, and they said, oh, we know you. You're the guy who has this Afghan descent who came back. And I go, yeah. And we started talking, and I go, so I was like, they're like, why are you sitting with us? And I go, when would I ever have a chance to do this? You know?
Yeah.
And I said, and then and I asked them a few questions, and I said, well, like what's the safest place in Afghanistan? They go, right at this table right now. And they go, here's the trick, it's all a business. I was like, what? And they were it was great. We were talking about all that stuff. And I do have a picture that means that I can never run for president. But the point is that maybe in Afghanistan I can run, but not here. But the thing is that I don't think people realize how beloved some of these leaders are, but also embedded. I mean, in the height of the U.S. control, they were still all having lunch and dinner at the Intercon. I mean,
Oh yeah,
in plain sight during the day. It was so they were working with um, the ANA and then all the special forces group. They would just ride right in and ride right
yeah,
out. And you'd be sitting there, and there would be you'd be having a lunch or dinner of because Afghans are passionate about eating things that had parents. So it's all like lamb or this
yeah.
or that, and there'd be a pile of bones, and everybody be talking and stuff. And I didn't know enough about who was whom, but until I socialized quite a bit. But it was an amazing moment in time, and this was the 80th anniversary, I think, of the Indonesian embassy of Indonesian independence. They invited everybody they knew, and everyone came to that party, and there was no restrictions. It did all those rings of steel, the security chain that some nerd had.
We've seen those.
Yeah, it didn't mean anything. And so I don't think people realize how beloved these people are, but the access, it wasn't like they were restricted during during the U.S. Presence there. Would you agree with that?
About the beloved part, no. I wouldn't agree with that because to me, in my experience, what I saw from these leaders was a few reasons as to why like they had the influence. Influential, yes.
Yes.
Beloved, no. Influential, why? Because these were the people that you would go to when you had a grievance. And these people would use that grievance you had, that pain you had, and they would press on it to get you to see how they're fighting for you. Whether they were actually fighting for you or not is a whole other thing.
Right.
But
But as we look at
yeah,
this, your book, the point of your book about the Afghan people taking sort of responsibility for the course of their nation, that system was still in place even during the American presence, you know?
it was.
So,
It was. No, I'm not disagreeing with that bit. See, okay, maybe I should clarify this. When I say they're not beloved, I meant by the people.
right,
But they are beloved because they're useful. They are beloved by intelligence agencies because they have influence, they have power, they have, everything, and they can get stuff done.
but there
As
was
an
a whole
intelligent,
our guy thing, like and like Atanor, like those guys, the Atanor guys, they love that guy, like they love,
oh, well, you're going to have diehard fans, people that have been prospering because of that one person.
right,
They've been buying houses, they've been getting that. Let me give you an example. I went to Mazar in 2020. Yeah, 2020. We were doing an audit. The police officer, the chief of police there was a lieutenant colonel. He was wearing the form and the badge, the form and the rank of a brigadier general, which is one against the law, but I don't know, it stuck with me. But the guy came to pick us up at the airport. It was me, the deputy minister of security, which is like the chief of police for Afghanistan, and one other guy. And instead of taking us to the police headquarters, he took us straight to the governor's house.
okay,
I'm like, what the hell are you doing? What is going on here? He's like, well, the governor said, the wali said wanted to meet you guys. I'm like, you're the commander of the police. You're the provincial police chief. You're not supposed to be doing this. But then the way that he walked in, the way he was greeted, the way they loved him there, the way he was beloved,
yeah,
it does go back to your point. But then again, we come out, we go to the police HQ, and then a week later, when I do my notes and everything, the guy had bought 4 houses in Bazaar in 6 months on a salary of 37,000 Afghanis per month,
yeah.
which is what, roughly $600, $700.
Dollars, yeah,
I'm like, I need to learn how to do this. My
yes.
dad was a civil servant for 40 years. And at the end of it, all he could manage was a lousy 2 bedroom apartment that he still hasn't paid off. I'm like, how do these people do this?
Yeah.
So
Well,
that beloved part, when you bribe people with protection, with power, with money, that makes you beloved. And at the same time, the other side of that coin is the fact that You will get a lot of people loving their ethnic leaders simply because one, lack of education, two, the life they've lived through war. They've lived the life through war, and every time since they were little kids, they have been told that this person was responsible for this. When there was the Pashtuns were in power, they would go after the Tajiks and the Hazaras and the Imaks and the Nuristanis because when they were in power, they did this. So remember earlier I mentioned the vicious cycle of revenge and grievance?
Yeah.
This is exactly what it is. A person, an educated Afghan, an educated person from Afghanistan. I'm just gonna leave the word Afghan here because even that is another point of discussion for some new young people nowadays. But if you have the case where someone from a different ethnicity, let's take the Jumbish, the when the Dr. Najib's government fell in 1992. They came like remember the cases of how many women jumped off of the balconies from Makrorian?
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, yes.
Remember those?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you think that the families of those people
yeah,
they would not come back with grievances and with revenge when they had the power?
right.
Do you think they would not side and become part of someone with more influence, more money, and more guns to make that dream come true?
Yeah,
How many Hazaras have been killed by Taliban and by other people and by even by Pashtuns and Tajiks over the years? Do you think that the Hazaras will not feel they need to stick together under a leader who is either Muhakkik or Khalili or somebody else who is really not a leader for them, but someone who uses their collective support to gain influence and power?
yeah,
Do you think Muhakkik and Khalili gives a crap about Hazara people?
yeah,
They don't. Do you think Dostum cares about the Uzbek people as long as they don't serve him? No, he doesn't. Do you think Hikmatyar does that? Do you think Mullah Omar does that? Do you think the folks sitting now in Ark they care about the Pashtuns? No, they don't.
yeah.
This,
It's all
yeah,
profits and economics.
it,
It really is.
exactly. It's about always about the money, about the influence, about the power. When people talk about in Afghanistan, these warlords, commanders, these power people who with power, and they're now their offspring. Now their kids are getting into politics, and they want to lead the country and fight against injustice and the Taliban and all that. Here's the thing: you kill right now. Look at the Taliban and the let's go with the biggest opposition. It used to be Mullah Omar.
Yeah,
Now it's Mullah Yaqub.
yeah,
It used to be Jalaluddin Khani. Now it's Suraj Uddin Khani. It used to be Ahmad Shah Massoud. Now it's Ahmad Massoud. So we have this proverb. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's the same donkey, just a different saddle.
right, right.
They keep going round and round, changing power between the two of them, three of them, four of them, whatever. You've got two, three major players, and you got the little sidekicks running around trying to have, cling on and suckle to the teeth of power.
Yeah.
It does not change. Do you think that people whose families you don't even know and were known as the Ashram back in the day, do you think they're going to come and bring you democracy? No. And
No.
democracy is a whole other topic.
Well,
But
it's very tough,
mm,
you know. I like when I was young, when I was younger. Well, when I was going to Afghanistan, and I would talk with some of. I was in Helmand, and I would talk with some of the the religious leaders and the shuras and back and forth. You know, I would say, wow, Afghanistan has been practicing democracy at the Shura and Jirga level before anyone. And then everybody would shake their heads, you know what I mean? And then it'd be like, no two democracies are the same. I used to do this speech, and I'd say, well,
yeah.
you got the British democracy as a parliamentary system, but they have a House of Lords, which is appalling to Americans, and Afghans need to develop their own democracy. There's no shortcuts. I used to do this whole thing. And
Thank you.
and
Yeah.
everybody used to shake their heads and everybody used to do that. But, the so what and what now, was always the difficult part, right? So,
Yeah.
because of the different ethnic groups had foreign interventionist support, and then on top of that, you had the backdrop of security, and you had all the kinds of other things happening. Just like when I would talk about with the ulama council, and I'd say, the highest form of justice is Islamic law, and they would all shake their heads and say yes. And I, I'm Muslim, I believe that, but that,
Yeah.
of course, you gotta weave, are you a Maliki, a Sherry Maliki, are we going in this way?
No,
Who knows? So the point is that I think the challenge is that there's a all right, your book sets the stage by going through the history of these different events, correct? And talking about
exactly. No.
the reactions of the Afghan people to these events and the outcomes. But the challenge is that it's a there's I mean my assertion is after the Mongol invasion after 1240, there is virtually no rebuilding of a civilization that is Afghan in nature, or Afghan, and that's what I would argue. I mean, I don't want to.
Like, yeah, I would not disagree with you,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. The reason I wouldn't disagree with you is that we had a civilization and a culture that was an accumulation of different peoples from different countries, and what Afghanistan was. It was Khorasan and Haryana and all that, and it all came together, and it made what Afghanistan is.
right. The Silk
After
Road,
that,
the Silk Road,
exactly, yeah,
Samarkand, and
Bukhara
the
and all that,
Transcends.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We did have
yeah,
governments, so to speak, or monarchies that lasted for years and decades, and there was peace and prosperity and everything. What I focus on in the book is that the identification and sort of the formalization, not maybe in words and documents, but sort of formalization of the fact that let's use ethnicity to keep people at perpetual war because one, war is good for us. It boosts the economy. It keeps bringing the money, laundering the money. It makes people rich.
right.
And second, other countries go through this evolution of their society, of their social norms, and they start off like a lot of people talk about a job and everything, and the veils and the chadar. But go back to history. Look at Europe, 400 years ago, 500 years ago. How many women wore something on their heads and covered their heads?
Right.
Go back to the United States, 300 years ago, 200 years ago, right after the independence. How many of them were walking around the way they walk around now?
Yeah,
The problem with Afghanistan was that it was never given that fair shot at that evolution. Every time something started, a new war came in. Every time people found their footing to start to sort of identify who they are, how they want to do it, and go forward, something else was imposed on them. Now, this imposition is the biggest problem because when it comes to Afghans, imposition's not going to work. It's probably the same true for other people too in other countries, but for Afghans,
right.
democracy was imposed.
Yeah,
You and I come from families where we had democracy, where nothing was decided based just because one person decided that, this is what I want to do and this is final.
yeah,
We had our own version of democracy, but what the democracy came and the way it was imposed on us, it came as a foreign concept that immediately created backlash and people going to the defensive mode. And the product, the byproduct of it was things that was not nuanced enough for the Afghan society. The Afghan society has different layers. You've got the more open-minded, moderate ones living in the cities.
yeah,
You have the more conservative ones in the rural areas. Even then, they are not. Within the village, you've been to villages. I've been to villages. Once they know who you are, they trust you. It's like a huge, big, extended family.
yeah,
You know everybody. But what did change in the past 20, 30 years is the import of this very extremist version of Islam from the Deobandi school of funded by the Saudis and all these people through Pakistan that came in. The Afghan families in the villages, they would be completely okay with each other. They would know each other. They would not be wearing chadaris. And, if the man walked past, they would be like, by the way, because men are coming. We didn't have that. We had respect. When a man walked by and there was a family of somebody else, they would not look that way. They would say salam and they would move on.
yeah,
But years upon years of social engineering and pushing these deep extremist ideas, it changed the way things worked. It changed the way people were. A lot of young Afghans Where even me, when I was growing up, I would be like, Dad, I want to go out and have fun with my friends late at night.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you have to be home at this. I'm like, do you not trust me? And he would always go, I trust you, but I don't trust others.
Right.
That sentence to me is always been showing a fear that was injected subconsciously into their brains that we don't live in a safe society.
Yeah.
And it kept growing. And then that cycle of parenthood, I'd say the same thing to my son and daughter. I trust you guys, but I don't trust other people.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just that, the way this whole thing was designed and the big argument that the book makes is that the first um, step into solving the problem is understanding the problem. Right now, we don't understand the problem because if you ask people what happened during the first time that the Mujahideen came, a lot of these people won't remember that. They don't remember what happened when Mujahideen took Kabul. I remember it. I was there. I saw it. A lot of these people who talk about Taliban being peaceful don't remember what happened when Taliban took power in '96. I was there in Kabul. I got beat up on the first day because I was wearing sweatpants and I was not, dressed Islamically enough.
Right. Yeah.
I come from a Muslim family. My parents are Muslim. I'm a Muslim.
Everybody's.
It's never been an issue. It's never been an issue for us.
Yeah.
But it's an issue for these people who are pushing their own version of the religion that's not an Afghan thing.
So is it like a destiny interrupted type of situation where it's too unwieldy, or and like taking back the Afghan destiny, or is it more from a perspective of the book and your experience looking at it from a standpoint of there has to be a sort of reckoning of Afghan responsibility for what's been going on, really in charge of their own destiny, and they need to start figuring out. There needs to be a brain trust put together to talk about this because there's a lot of groups that have this is the we put a letter and this is the what Afghanistan should do and this is what Afghanistan should do, but I find most of them are trying to pitch a foreign benefactor to be the next group in charge. You know,
Yeah.
like here's the 10 point list of what needs to happen in Afghanistan right now. I mean, I have there's like 3 or 4 groups that they always ask me to get involved, and I'm like, I'm not. It's not my circus. It's not my monkeys. I'm not playing. It's not my job to figure out the destiny of Afghanistan. That's for the Afghans to figure out. Maybe in country, maybe some diaspora, but it has to be the younger generation that figures it out. And I said I can help facilitate things upon request, but I'm like an consultant. But
Yeah.
I think the challenge is that I don't see any it's there's the other side of it where look the Taliban that's there it's not although it's Diobani there's foreign interventionism through the Taliban they are Afghans
Yeah, they are.
and so
People, yeah, you're right. The people, it's one of those uncomfortable realities that
yeah
people mostly choose to sort of, overlook.
right
It is true. It is true.
and so
Um,
because they're Afghans you have this so is it an Afghan is in essence this what is like I said, there's no shortcuts to democracy. This is this we had that 20 years, 20 some 22 years of democracy. There we in America we had the Civil War. Is this maybe that part of the natural growing pains of a modern Afghanistan, the Taliban return?
um, that is that is a question that is dependent on multiple variables. And by variables, what I mean is now you've heard of the term the Gordian knot, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Afghanistan to me is that Gordian knot that is going to need time, that is going to need patience to untie all those knots because years upon decades, centuries upon centuries, that knot has been tightened and it's been rolled in and rolled over. And at this point, it's even probably worse than that. So what didn't work during the Republic and what is not going to work now is quick wins,
Right.
impatience. It's not going to work. And what is not going to work is continuing the same cycle of you killed my people, I'm going to kill your people as soon as I get power. What is not going to work is bringing in new ideas, but secretly or not so secretly backed by a foreign benefactor. It's just this the chain, the links in the same chain that keeps repeating.
Yeah.
Yes, the Taliban are Afghans. Yes, they have been, a lot of them were born and raised in Pakistan or in the tribal area. A lot of this, the foreign interventionism is there. They have been funded by this group, this country, that can, all of that.
Right.
But here's the thing to me, today, if the Taliban are to be held accountable, that accountability comes from the Afghan people. That's the only way for them to have any salvation, to be accepted as members of that country, of that society.
Well, what does accountability look like, though? What do you what, like? You're talking about having a truth, just a court of justice or a court of reconciliation.
I might, yeah, that's see. This is the thing. Like the reason I mentioned the Gordian knot, and the reason that mentioned impatience is because of how ambiguously defined these terms are. Like it's a legitimate question. When I talk about accountability, what is that?
Yeah,
What
I
does
mean,
that mean? If you kill two of my brothers and I killed one of yours, should I kill one more brother of yours?
right.
Is that the way it looks?
Yeah, I
If
mean,
you blew up my house, should I come now and blow up your house with your family in it?
yeah, I mean, and your
Now,
Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Afghanistan. I mean, who would? I mean, it's just it sounds great. I just don't know if you could possibly institute something. Like you could knock on a deaf man's door all day. You know, like
yeah,
how would you institute something? Who would be in charge of it? And then you just get into this whole Bidal thing. You'd be revenge. So before you know it, so
yeah.
what do you do?
No, here's the thing. The way I look at it, I don't think one, we have very simple answers.
Right.
When it comes to Afghanistan, you don't have simple yes or no answers. You don't have black and white. You have gray and you have complicated. Um, what I stand for, what I believe is in what I think Afghans should do is them taking the lead.
Yeah.
It will come through conversation. It will come from them talking to each other and understanding the pain that each of them went through. Every single Afghan you talk to, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is that, this is how I was wronged.
Yeah.
Problem is, we never paid attention to the grievances. We never paid attention to how much people have lost. We always said, this is how much I lost. And that's the thing. Like the Gordian knot example that I give, it has to take its time. It has to be natural, and it has to be done by Afghans themselves. They
So,
need to talk to each other without the talking points being put in their mouths.
well, so here we have the Taliban is in charge. They're running the
Mhm.
government right now. Is there a path with the current government, as you see it, as the Kabul Institute? And maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but they're in charge. They're looking for legitimacy. Which means that in looking for legitimacy, you can negotiate, right? Because if
Right.
if they want something, then you could turn around and say, well, we're going to institute, human rights. You're going to help us with the strategic interests of the United States. We're going to help you, from a national security standpoint. We're going to, help us with some of these things, and we can provide resources from an American perspective to uh, fortify civil society and the different constituencies within Afghanistan. But in doing it in a way that's through public diplomacy and not through either an occupying force or an international interventionist overlay, because then the governments are communicating. But the problem is, or the challenge is that you've got the Taliban, right? So which is very one dimensional. They don't necessarily
Well,
represent the entire community.
yes and no. One, they
Well,
don't
no, I'm
represent
asking
the.
you, like, what
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you do?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So to me, the Taliban don't represent the entire Afghanistan.
Right.
They don't.
But they're in charge.
But
I mean, you're dealing with
but
that.
they are in charge. They are in charge now, and also bear in mind that the Taliban are not the Taliban of 1996.
Well, that's the thing. It's definitely a 2 or 3.0. They're not the old guard
Yeah,
is gone.
these ones are smart. They're strategic. What they do constantly, especially when it comes to things like human rights, the girls' rights, the education. My opinion is that they are always negotiating and leveraging. Their goal, their end goal is formal recognition. That's when they go from a de facto regime, an occupier, a group that has taken a country hostage, into a government is when they're formally recognized.
Yeah. I mean, so
And
you have this, right.
not just by the Russian government,
Right. So
which
you
is a
have
very marriage of convenience.
right. So you have the Taliban 2 or 3.0, right? They're educated. It's really the old guard is gone. We've either killed them off or they've died off or they're marginalized. There's still some there. But you have this, highly educated, highly mobile, engaged with in digitally. They're
Mhm.
which is an opportunity. They call themselves Talibs, but the reality is they're married. They're married in many cases to modern women within the Afghan context and the global, the global Western context. So there's an opportunity there. So do you think that
Well,
what is that opportunity? What does that look like to you?
that's the thing. Right now, to me, Afghanistan, and I'm going to give an example, which from a subject that I'm not very good at in chemistry. Right now, Afghanistan is in a state of flux where you have multiple unknown chemicals, some of them known, some of them unknown. You've put them together, and the way they sort of, interact with each other will determine what happens next. Now, some people will say that, people will rise up. Some people say that we're going to take it back with our guerrilla warfare. Some
Right.
people are just waiting for the next country to step in, mostly looking at China right now to be the next one. Like the cycle has to be repeated, right? Um, what I think and what we think in Kabul Institute is that the answer to that question, one, there is no clear answer. The person who has that answer will be the next president of that country or the next emir or the next leader or whatever. Right now, there's no answer to that question because the people are not informed enough. The people are not educated enough. The people are either left in illiteracy, in darkness, or they're left in apathy where they don't care.
No,
One of the things that we do before accountability, before governance, before anything is education.
no.
You have to educate the people. You have to give the people the chance to study. And in contrary to popular belief that the Afghan men don't want their kids to school, they do. Every Afghan man that I know, every Afghan man that you know, they want their daughters and sons to go to school
Yeah, of course.
for any number of reasons. And that's the thing. The long term vision, the long term win for the Afghans will come from education. That's the cornerstone of something if we're looking for something long term, and made and driven by us, by Afghans.
So
Any other option is just like a temporary band aid.
internally in country, I mean, is Kabul University still in effect? Is it still functioning or no?
Kabul University is still in effect. It's still teaching boys about different issues. They've been constantly changing the curriculum of what is being taught, making the topics that were taught more towards what is a very traditional, conservative, and strict regimen of what Islamic studies should be.
Right. I mean,
Which
AYF is gone, right? And they're
Yeah,
in Qatar. So I think it's in Qatar. But like I have a PhD in what the AYF is. So
yeah,
but the reality is like that's now a diaspora movement and
it
a
is.
neo-colonial situation. So
Yeah.
so in country, what does education look like when you say that there needs to be education? What is it you know Kabul University, which is probably the biggest school in the
Not just Kabul University. Like, let me give you an example. People talk about letting Afghan girls go to school.
yeah.
Me, I'm not for that. I'm like, it really depends on what school they go to. What do they study? What do they learn? Like
Right.
you could send them to school and they all become psychotic killers. Is that something that you would want for your girls?
Yeah, I mean,
You'd want,
there is a challenge if you establish schools for girls under Telig rule that they will become that one of three things will happen. One is it becomes a grooming ground
hmm
for something that's sexual or predatory in nature. A third of it is becoming turning them into zealots,
hmm
and then maybe the last third, maybe the last third is something that's, it's something productive that comes out of it where you could put, different skill sets, but I'm not sure that that's possible. I think you get to, and then you have that last 10% where they actually will get something out of it and it'll become something productive. But you're right. The context of schools in the under Taliban rule for girls is a treacherous track.
yeah.
It's not something that would be it would become very predatory.
Yeah, so the exactly, and it really depends on that context and that nuance, and that's something we've consistently been missing in Afghanistan. So the way I see it, with education being the one thing that would show us the way, and going back to your question of whether that is the Kabul University, it's not. It's not just Kabul University. It has to be the entire um, um, educational infrastructure of Afghanistan. And knowing what you know about the educational infrastructure of Afghanistan, here's, here's the thing. As much as it pains me to say it, but the Taliban right now have this opportunity to do something that's never been done before.
Mm.
They have the opportunity to actually create an Afghan state that is self-sufficient, that is sovereign, and that it works for its people. And that comes through three things. One, internal legitimacy. How do you get legitimacy? People often ask. Is it the number of votes you get? Is it the number of people that show up for an event?
Right.
No, it starts at something very simple. Take care of your people.
Yeah. It
That's
is
all you need.
social services and
Yeah,
consensus.
yeah, that's all you need. Second thing is people who know the Taliban leaders, they know that a lot of their girls and daughters, like you mentioned, go to these very nice and posh schools, some of them out of the country. The foreign minister Abbas Stanigzei's daughters are famous for being university graduates, very successful in a different country.
Okay.
The problem that I see is that this Gordian knot of being so, everything has been so intertwined together that no one wants to untangle it. You've got the European countries who are okay with the Taliban delegations coming to their countries, visiting them, meeting them to talk about this or that, but they're not still opening the embassies, which means that, when the European nations talk about the issues of human rights, they talk about women's rights to education, those are just talking points for negotiations. You've been in negotiations, you know how it works. It's never about the principles and the people. It's not about that. It's about what do I get out of this deal? That's the same thing with the Talib mentality. That is the same thing with the German government that invited them, the Belgian government that invited the Taliban, the Norway government that invited them, and the Russian government that officially recognized them. The fact that the Pakistani Afghan ambassador in Pakistan is best friends with the Pakistani foreign ministry and lives there and speaks the language and everything, it's another thing. The fact that the Iranians invited both NRF and the Taliban to the funeral of Khamenei, that was just, to them, it does not matter. It's like they said their excuse was that Afghanistan's people have different representatives. No, they don't. You just invite different groups of warlords and these extremist groups, and you call them representatives of people. Who chose them as representatives of people? They didn't. So the thing is, that's the one side of the argument. The international community's lack of actually holding the Taliban accountable. If they wanted to, they could. Condition-based engagement.
Right.
You do this, I do this.
Yeah.
Open the girls, I give you money. Open the schools for the kids, I help you build your water dams, build your military, I'll give you one recognition. That's the thing that the Western nations, Europe, US, all these things, they don't do that. Honestly, because we're all suffering from the shiny object syndrome. Afghanistan is not a shiny object anymore.
Yeah.
We had 500 people killed in the past 6 months. Didn't even make the news. And it was done by Pakistan, who was on the board of peace.
Yeah. It's
And who's
difficult.
mediating, yeah, it's mediating peace deals between the US and Iran.
It's a difficult operational theater, and once we left, we lost, we lost all of our logistics from a Western American perspective, and so
Hmm.
the challenge is that you can't. I mean, this maybe the better way to describe. I mean, there was a warlord that had taken an Airbus, turned off its. Yeah, it's a stupid.
Yeah.
So this is
Oh,
this is
I believe you
I'll
because
disclose this
stuff
now.
like that has happened.
I'll
I
disclose this
believe
now
you.
too. So this was I want to I can't remember. I don't think it was a Safi, but it was Safi Airlines. But oh, I can't. Com. I think it was a Com plane. The Com Airlines. And they turn up the transponder. It shows up in in the south, right? And so I remember like it was a buddy of mine who was part of the Safi stuff. Josh Boost us, and you have to what's called a wet lease. So you a wet crew. There's a crew that's able to go in with like mechanics and everything else, and so we had to fly in, and I had to go down with another guy and talk to this guy and be like, we want the plane back. And it was so what did they do? Like we were we said, look, the American, we can't, as an American, American government's not going to let this happen, yada yada yada. And he was like, well, like he's like, who says I have the plane? And I was like, look, here's the problem. um like I'm just a messenger. And you know me, I want to go, and just want karai. I want to play some fiscot. I want to just hang out. Save your green tea. Like I just want to hang out. And what did they do? The Americans were like, so they said, we're gonna send some fighter planes over. They're gonna break the sound barrier. They're gonna shake the house a little bit, and we're gonna scare the hell out of everybody. And I said, okay. They said, I think that'll work, and that's what happened. And so the challenge is like, and right away he gave us the access to the plane. The wet crew fueled it up, got it, did all the maintenance. They got the plane up. They put the transponder on, and they got the plane back. I mean, but this is an Airbus. It's millions and millions of dollars for this stupid plane, and this guy's got one that he just took. You know, and it's like the buffoonery of it. But the thing is, like, where is he going to go? What airport's going to let him land? Like, what is he like thinking? So, but the thing is like this people don't realize that this is the type of power and guile, that people have there to do things without thinking things through, right? And it
Yeah.
affects all of the relationships at an exponential level, right? And so even as a foreign interventionist, as Americans that were doing stuff, you had to. There was a lot of these little things that you had to go through, that you had to deal with, and you got to. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you kind of got to get it past that when it comes to the way in which things are dealt with from a Afghan cultural perspective. You got to get past this sort of, what can I get immediately? How can I, and we'll think about the consequences later. If this is valuable right now, let's do it.
Yeah.
And without looking at some of, like I said, what's there might be immediate ROI, but if you're going to build a country, there's no shortcuts. Africa's dealing with this right now in a whole
Mm.
post-colonial context.
No.
Burkina Faso and a lot of the Francophile countries are breaking, right? And they're trying to figure out who they are and what they're about. And so, right now, what is, the maybe there isn't a formal path forward, but the idea that the Afghan people, there's an Afghan government right now that is Taliban. Put that aside. Right now, they are willing to negotiate, and negotiation means that they have to give something up for something they want. We're just talking like straight lines here. So,
Yeah.
for example, a U.S. consulate in Kabul that helps with national security issues for the U.S. It doesn't do anything with with immigration.
Everything else,
It's
basically.
it's just national security, it's human rights, and economic development.
Yeah.
Is so, just a consulate that does that is valuable for the Afghan people because then there's a presence. Is like is that the type of long-term sort of planning or long-term agenda item that you think would move the needle a little bit? Because once there's a presence, you're dealing with building economic, right, development, which means that people are going to start earning money. Human rights, which is stuff that we want, right? We're building, and then that dealing with national security concerns that we want, and then as the economic development starts to move, that's going to help American companies, which is going to in turn help the Afghan people. But it's a transactional engagement. Do you think something like that would help from an American, German, French, doesn't matter which perspective, but it would happen on a diplomatic scale to negotiate benefits for the Afghan people, but also as a state to state, B to B sort of agenda? Do you think something like that would help?
Um, if we're being very, very idealistic, yes. But before we get to that point, I think what really is important here is building that trust. Now, I understand that in politics and geopolitics, it's never trust; it's always common interests.
Right.
But then again, right now, Taliban are playing the game of who's my highest bidder. With the way the world is so multipolar right now, who are your immediate threats right now? Who can bomb you faster?
Right.
Is it going to be the US, which is thousands of miles away, and its strategic positions around the geography is under threat right now because it's already engaged in a war with a different country?
Right.
Or is it China, which is just across, just a neighboring over the wall, or Russia, for that matter, or Pakistan, which is a political is a nuclear power. So the Taliban right now are playing the highest bidder. The official recognition by the Russians, that was I'm not gonna call it a punchline, but that was like the strangest thing I thought I would see, because the whole reason for the existence of Mujahideen and the Taliban was
Right.
the Soviets.
Well,
I'm
they're
like, how,
again.
explain to me, like I'm 5 years old, how does this make sense?
Well, but they're
Like,
not
you call it
Soviets anymore.
politics.
They're Russians. Come
I mean, that's the thing, right?
on.
It's just, it does not make any sense in what form, in any shape or form. They go sign a military agreement with the same people who is the reason they started the jihad and threw Afghanistan down a drain.
Yeah.
And they kept telling us that they did this for this and that, but look at what you're doing now.
I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that. I mean, they're one of the few players in country, that has resources, right? So, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
the,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, forgoing their hypocrisy, because they're never going to live that down. Never. People do have a goldfish memory, but they also, when it comes to it, they can remember a lot of things. Right now, it is a marriage of convenience. The Russians want a buffer state between them and what could come from the U.S. and European Union and all that side. It is a new version of the Cold War,
yeah,
just a bit more. Like right now, even right now, the Taliban are trying to get more formal recognitions. They're using the girls' education as a leverage. They're using the strategic location of Afghanistan as another point of leverage. They are using anything they want, they can, to use as leverage to gain legitimacy. If not, let me rephrase that: not gain legitimacy, but gain formal recognition, which is not the same as legitimacy when it comes, because you have to have both the external and the internal one.
yeah,
Right now, their priority is getting that formal recognition. Now, if they were working for Afghanistan, if they were actually believing that Afghanistan was a nation occupied by the West for 20 years and they were fighting a self-righteous a righteous war, this would be their chance to prove that,
right.
to be in the service of the people.
So
Now,
how do
I
they?
honestly,
How? How would they do that? What do you
Oh,
think?
we talked about it.
Yeah, like
The social services, the protection, the safety, security.
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
those three things, like implementing those three things, and with definitive goals and anchor points.
right. Exactly. But no, but that's the second bit. Like that's the internal part of it. The external part, the form of the international one, comes with negotiation of what are acceptable anchor points for them and for the international community. And based on that, they will be the anchor point slash milestone slash, conditions based on which the international community will start to recognize the Taliban.
Yeah,
Now, if they're smart and if they want to be someone who is in power and wants to serve the people, that's what they will do.
yeah.
If not, they will repeat the same mistakes that the regimes and the governments before them made, and then in a few years, something else will happen. They will be gone. You'll have a new chapter, same donkey, different saddle.
Well, I think that so when it comes to a path forward, you think there's a possibility with the current government that's in place. I mean, and the challenge is like there's I just talked to a couple of my Afghan friends and like nothing's going to happen until we overturn the Taliban. I was like, and what's for? I was like, what's on the other side of that? Like what are we talking about? Yeah, that like so. Let's just the phrase. Just because one flower has sprung doesn't mean that doesn't mean or is grown. Spring has sprung.
Yeah.
You know that phrase. So the challenge is like this is what we're dealing with right now. And if there's an opportunity, should we take it? You know, should the Afghan people take it, or is there something else that can happen?
I mean, the way I see it right now, the Gordian knot, the way that the chemical things are right now interacting with each other, and the chaos that it brings, every chaos comes with opportunity.
Yeah.
It really depends on how people who are in power and Afghans themselves can take this opportunity. Now, I don't put too much on Afghans because they are still on sea legs. They're just, getting out of that trauma of what happened. They're still not out of the whole. We need to put food on the table. We have no money. We have no economy. And the influx of the money, the aid money that kept coming in and getting injected to the economy to give us all some money to put food on the table, that doesn't exist anymore. It's not there anymore. So the thing is, it's a very convoluted piece of um, multiple underlying laying sometimes even mixed with each other lines that needs to be first entangled, identified, and then pursued. I think this conversation is something that you and I could probably put them separately and then go one by one at each one and explore what are these, why are these, what are the consequences, what are the potential outcomes and outputs of these.
Yeah.
Right now, you've got education, you've got internal legitimacy, you've got food and economy, you've got security, you've got war, you've got formal recognition, you've got all these things happening at the same time at this you know everywhere in Afghanistan.
Well, like I said, maybe what we should do is revisit this conversation with specificity on our next recording. And what we could do is we can kind of go over. I know why I want to do this question that you put online. This is maybe a little bit of a teaser. It's like did the collapse of Afghanistan in August 2021 you feel sudden to you? That's such a great question that you put online, and then it's like, or did it, or did it feel like you were watching something you'd already seen coming? That's I think that's going to be the theme of the next recording that we do, and then maybe we
Yeah.
revisit the bleeding nation and with the path forward. If someone wants to get your book, what's we'll put it in the show notes, but it's if someone wants to get your book, how do they get it? What's the
Right now, it's available globally. Well, not right now. As of tomorrow, August 14th, it will be globally available for anybody who wants to order it. You can find it on on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, on Books a Million, and essentially, you can just Google it and you can find it. It's in paperback for the time being, and Kindle, and ebook version. Um, but what I would suggest is for anybody who wants to read this is to take their time reading it and understanding the whole story. We're often given a picture incomplete without nuance and context. And I think I am a firm believer that one of the reasons that the whole project of rebuilding Afghanistan failed in the past 25 years was because we missed the nuance and the context. We took a program from somewhere else, brought it in. I'm not opening another discussion line for us, not for today, but definitely something we can revisit.
Yeah.
But it is there. It has been there, and we missed the context completely. Regarding the question that I had that we should definitely talk about, it's
That's the
a lot
backdrop
of.
of the statement you just made. That's the backdrop, you know?
That's, I think, it's definitely a very interesting question, and I am looking forward to us discussing that.
Yeah, I think it, I mean, that is the you were talking about, you're talking about missing it. As someone who's an outsider going in, who's who kind of went in as a do-gooder, and to be someone who involved in, obviously the strategic interests of the Republic, the American Republic. It was very clear that everything was off track and off the rails. And there was, like, I think I mentioned, like, my experience from 2012 to 2014. Those something happened in those 2 years, and but we can talk about it in our next recording. But I
No,
really do appreciate you taking the time. It's very gracious of you. And if you're
no,
want, yeah, if you
I've
want,
enjoyed our conversation.
yeah, and if you
Thank you
want
for having me.
Afghanistan from an Afghan, the bleeding nation, superpowers, ethnic politics, and Afghanistan's collapse is going to be available tomorrow, and it'll be in the show notes. We'll be promoting it and seeing what's going on. But it goes from the history all the way to, what happened, and gives a lot of insight of the who, what, where, when, and how. Thank you. I appreciate you
Thank
taking.
you. Yeah.